Sustainability can often seem like a depressing catalog of doom and gloom. But although we face serious challenges, a better and more sustainable future is possible. Welcome to Sustainable Planet. I'm political scientist Michael Baranowski. My co-host and spouse is political scientist Kimberly Weir. We're going to start off this inaugural episode with the two most important questions for any new podcast. What are we doing and why should you care? Well, what we're doing is launching a podcast to discuss sustainability and the environment, which on the face of it seems like kind of a ridiculous thing to do. I mean, after all, there are already a gazillion podcasts about sustainability and the environment. But Kimberly and I believe that we'll be giving you something different that's well worth your time. We're political scientists, not ideologues. We understand that politics is the art of the possible and that coming together to try to make the planet a better place means that you just can't impose your will on everyone else, no matter how right you believe you are. And of course, there's always the possibility that you could be wrong. And while we're both political scientists, we have very different backgrounds, which we believe will bring a healthy diversity of outlook to the topics we cover. My focus is American politics and policies. Kimberly's areas of expertise, international relations, and she has a depth of knowledge concerning the politics of food. That's in a major environmental and sustainability issue. She's actually written an excellent book about this, not that I'm biased, called From Jicama to Jackfruit. Kimberly also knows a ton about sustainability, something she's taught multiple classes on. And while ideology won't be driving our discussions, we're not in lockstep here either. I mean, I voted for as many Republican presidential candidates as I have Democrats, and so Kimberly is likely to be to my left on more than a few issues. We won't just be pontificating in some academic way about big national, international issues and policies. We're also going to consider what regular people can do. We don't just talk about this stuff. Over the last number of years now, we've made a serious attempt to build sustainability into our lives. And we'll also be discussing how to do that without driving yourself absolutely crazy in the process. We have got a bunch of great topics lined up. Future episodes, we're going to be talking about capitalism and commodity fetishism, techno-optimism, alternative energy, fair trade, food, plastics, waste, resource depletion. There are just so many fascinating things we're looking forward to getting into in the weeks and months and, we hope years to come. Now, to this point, I've done literally all of the talking, and that is not some patriarchal power play on my part, I promise. And yes, that's a lot of alliteration for one sentence. I've been podcasting for a long time. As many of you may know, I'm the creator and most weeks a co-host on The Politics Guys, which has been around since 2015. And so we thought it made sense for me to kick things off. But now I'm going to shut up for a little bit and turn things over to Kimberly by way of a question. Kimberly, what is sustainability exactly? I mean, how do you conceptualize it?
I think the most accurate way to describe sustainability is that it's an attempt to try to live in such a way that we don't exhaust more resources than what we use, and that we give back to the planet to make sure that we're not putting ourselves into an irrevocable hole.
And I guess the potential problem with this is twofold. Number one, as the world population gets larger and also as it becomes more advanced, standards of living go up. Those are sort of twin problems facing sustainability, right?
Well, I'd say that the bigger problem is the latter of what you mentioned. The population is going to level off. And so while we do have increasing population, and that's problematic, where the increasing population is happening is places that are still more economically disadvantaged, and they're not the ones who are tapping out the resources. It's the people who we do have to worry about are those who are increasing middle class populations in big countries like China and India and Brazil and so forth. We are the ones, along with the global north countries, the developed countries, we're the ones who are out using the resources that we have available to us. And so that's where the big problem is that there are some places on the planet, a lot, actually, in fact, a lot, most countries in the world still need to develop. And so when we talk about sustainability issues, it's really about the consumption that's the problem. We, especially in developed countries and emerging economies like those that I listed, that are at a higher level of economic development and have hugely growing middle-class populations, we're using the planet's resources far faster than the planet can replenish itself. And the resources that are being provided by those people in the poorer countries, those are ones that are being used also by people in global north countries and emerging economies. And so consumption is the big problem.
Right. And it's not like this is a new problem, right? I mean, concerns about sustainability date back, well, probably centuries at this point.
Yeah, it was the 14th century. The term consumption actually was associated with tuberculosis and the wasting of the body. From then, in the 16th century, it came about to using up material resources. And then by the 18th century, we see the Industrial Revolution and mass production and colonization and this increase of luxury goods going to those colonizers, those empires, and using those resources. And we see higher levels of consumption. And then by the 20th century, we just have outright conspicuous consumption just to show off a person's status. And where we are today is that we just have really high levels of consumption, and we're just making the situation worse. And as more people around the world have increased standard of living, they want to emulate that.
And so it becomes this sort of descending spiral, I guess you could say. But I think it's important to point out that there are some people who would argue that, yes, we have a problem maybe right now, assuming they believe we have a problem, but that this is sort of a bump in the road, that people have been talking about resource depletion and unsustainability since, well, like you said, the 14th century. And we've always managed to find a way to keep going, whether it's a shift from trees, burning wood, to go into fossil fuels, from fossil fuels into alternative energy, tapping into different sort of resources. And so this is really not so much a consumption problem, but a problem where our technological expertise has not yet caught up to our consumption habits, but that will in fact happen. And so a lot of people who are concerned about sustainability are focusing on the wrong thing, maybe, or are overly concerned. And that's a position I'm pretty sure you don't really agree with, right?
No, and I think that in having researched and taught about sustainability, that those are a number of the issues that you raised are the issues that people generally think, well, it's not a real problem, right? And that technology is going to solve whatever problems come along and deal with the situation. That another side of that too is that individuals who do care oftentimes get very frustrated with the fact that they feel like they can't really do anything as a single person to make a difference. And we also see that people are the basis behind, especially in developed global north countries, behind governments as voters. And so it makes it difficult for governments to actually effect any sort of policy, to enact policies, to deal with climate change issues and sustainability issues, because they have to be accountable to the voters. And so there's a lot of pushback from individuals who, like I said, even if they feel like they would like to do something, just feel completely paralyzed by the situation.
Yeah, well, I wanted to get into that a little bit because on one level, I think it's almost a rational response to say, listen, my carbon footprint could be zero. And that is such a small percentage of the whole that in effect makes no difference whatsoever. And if my carbon footprint is double what it is right now, by the same token, that really doesn't matter a whole lot on an individual level. So what's the incentive for me to either lower my carbon footprint or not raise my carbon footprint? And I'm sure that in the classes you've taught on sustainability, students have asked variants of that question to you a bunch of times. And so how do you respond to something like that?
I always think back to my colleague who one day I was in her office and she threw a can into the garbage can, or a bottle or something in her garbage can. And I sort of gasped and she went, "What?" And I said, "Oh, well, I was just, surprised you weren't recycling that." And so sometime later I was talking to her and she had mentioned, said, "I've been doing a lot better with this ever since you gasped when I threw the can or bottle into my garbage can." And she said, and I've even got my whole neighborhood recycling now. So you can, just by being one person who does one thing, or just by action, or maybe mentioning something, whether it was intentional or not, that, you can actually make a difference and have that cumulative effect. I know that one of the things we've talked about between the two of us is it's the same thing with voting.
Sure. But I think also it's important to point out that there are these people, and they irritate the heck out of me, these people who would say that, listen, if you're not only a vegan, but militant about it, or if you have a leather belt, well, then you're a bad person, right? And there are people like that. And I feel that whether they're talking about on an individual level, or they're criticizing policymakers for not embracing radical solutions, that in a sense, they're actually doing more harm than good.
Absolutely. I absolutely emphatically agree with you. I think that people oftentimes feel like if they're not doing everything, then there's no point in doing anything. And I think that a lot of people, like I mentioned, whether it's intentional or whether it's intended, end up saying or doing something that make other people feel bad. And then it might just actually have the adverse effect on them and say, well, then I'm just not going to do anything. I'll just be a bad person, right?
As I think this suggests, there are a lot of things that we are going to be able to get into much greater depth on. There are a wealth of topics related to sustainability and the environment. I'm definitely looking forward to it. Kimberly, I'm sure you're looking forward to it.
I sure am.
Yeah, it'd be kind of weird if we weren't, right? Why are we doing this? So we hope you're looking forward to it too. And but we will close this brief introduction episode right here. We would appreciate it if you could rate us and leave a review on whatever podcast app you're listening on. It really helps out. I also want to let you know that if you have a question or a comment for us, you can reach us in a bunch of ways. There's email. We're mail@splanetpod.com. And we're also on Instagram, Facebook, and X. And those are also all places you can not only get in touch with us, but keep up with everything we're doing as well. And we'll always have links to those platforms in the show notes. Thanks so much for listening.